Mr. and Mrs. Abel were known throughout Lagos as both figures of wealth and generosity. They had built a life of prosperity that many admired, but their journey was not without struggles. At the heart of their success was Mr. Abel as a self-made man with a vision that extended beyond mere riches. However, the burden of his wealth was greater than anyone realized. Mr. Abel had 3 siblings, Chima, Kelechi, and Olivia. Chima and Kelechi were both men who, though capable, chose to lean on their brother's wealth rather than carve out their own paths. They relied on him for everything, from finances to daily needs. Olivia, their sister, while not as financially dependent as her brothers, still never fully embraced the independent life her brother had worked so hard to provide for her. For years, Mr. Abel had shouldered the responsibility of being the breadwinner for his entire family, not out of obligation, but out of love and duty. However, the reliance of his brothers was beginning to take its toll. Chima and Kelechi were perfectly content with the life Mr. Abel provided. They made no effort to establish businesses, invest in any venture, or provide for their own families. They often spoke of future plans and dreams, but these ideas never came to fruition. Mr. Abel would offer advice, but the brothers would dismiss his wisdom, thinking that their brother's wealth would always be a cushion beneath them. They had become entitled, with a deep sense of entitlement to his fortune. Olivia, on the other hand, was far more vocal, often questioning her brother's decisions, demanding more from him even though she was not as reliant as her brothers. Though he provided abundantly for his siblings, there was an undercurrent of resentment building within Mr. Abel. He had sacrificed so much to get to this point. The question lingered. Could his family continue to rely on him, or would they need to find their own way? Meanwhile, Mr. Abel and Caroline's son, Emma, was 8 years old, full of energy and curiosity. He had witnessed his parents' generosity, but he had yet to fully understand the complexities that came with wealth and the responsibilities it brought. Emma adored his father, but he also noticed the tension that began to grow within the family. His father seemed weary, his smile sometimes less genuine, and his conversations were more reflective. Mr. Abel's decision about how to handle his brothers' dependence would be the catalyst for everything that followed. The Abel family facade was crumbling. As wealth increased, so did the entitlement of Chima and Kelechi. They started demanding, not requesting, larger allowances, land, cars, and even shares in Mr. Abel's companies without offering a second of labor. What stung more was the resentment that started to simmer beneath their grateful smiles. Whispers among relatives emerged. If Abel truly cared, wouldn't he have built houses for all of us by now? Caroline, ever observant, warned her husband.
My love, you are feeding snakes in your own compound.
Your brothers no longer see you as a blessing, but as a ladder. And ladders eventually are discarded when the top is reached. One day, Kelechi burst into their home, enraged. A new rumor had reached him, one he believed wholeheartedly. You've started putting everything in Emma's name already, haven't you? Lands, stocks, everything! He yelled. Mr. Abel's face darkened.
What is yours that I have withheld, Kelechi?
You've withheld destiny, you with all your big man talk. If Papa had left wealth, you wouldn't be where you are. You would be one of us. That night, Mr. Abel sat alone in his study, staring at the ceiling as his past echoed around him. He remembered his youth in the village of Nsuka, his bare feet on red earth, how he sold ground nuts on the streets of Enugu to pay off his siblings' school fees. He remembered Kelechi as a boy, running beside him in tattered shorts. How had it come to this? But deeper cracks were forming, not only within the family, but inside his own soul. In the bustling markets of Onitsha, years ago, a younger Mr. Abel carried a tray of spare parts on his head, dodging different vehicles and hawkers. He never went beyond primary school. His dream of education died the day his father fell ill, and he had to choose between school fees for himself and that of his siblings. He chose them. He sent Chima and Kelechi to university in Nsuka and Olivia, to nursing school in Enugu, He ate once a day, slept on cement floors, and worked himself to the bone. He was the boy who sold engine oil until he owned a whole spare parts depot, then warehouses, then companies. He built a legacy of trade from the streets up, yet he remained without a certificate, only intelligence and scars. Yet the very people he sacrificed for, Chima with a degree in political science, Kelechi with a master's in engineering, and Olivia, a registered nurse, never used their credentials. They returned home after graduating from the university, jobless by choice, convinced they were too educated to start small. Why hustle, they thought, when they have a rich brother who is capable of paying off their bills? They demanded from their brother and also criticized him. They drove his cars, lived in his guest houses, and insulted his staffs. At family gatherings, they'd speak English too loudly, flash certificates like medals, but behind closed doors. They called their brother just a traitor. One day, Caroline caught Chima mocking her husband during a visit.
You know he can't even sign properly not to talk speaking good English.
He only knows how to draw a line on documents. Imagine. Caroline was silent, then replied coldly.
That line feeds all of you.
But the betrayal deepened. The day Mr. Abel stopped giving was the day the masks fell. It began subtly. Chima refused to return Mr. Abel's calls. Kelechi deleted him from a family WhatsApp group. Olivia started spreading sour whispers at the women's meeting in church. My brother can't even write his name. Yet he wants to teach me how to live. Then it turned venomous. At a family gathering, Mr. Abel quietly announced a new policy. No more handouts. If you want support, show initiative. Pitch a business idea. I will invest, not donate. The silence was violent. Then came the eruption. Investor K? With what experience? What do you know about investment? Spare part merchant. Chima barked with a drunken laugh. You advising me? I have a degree from UNN. Kelechi chimed in, bitter and red-eyed. The only reason we haven't surpassed you is because we were loyal. Now we know better. You used our sweat to build your empire while we were in school. Mr. Abel stood still, his face calm, but his eyes carried storms. Caroline clenched her jaw beside him. Sweat? When was the last time either of you broke a sweat doing anything? Olivia, seated with legs crossed and arms folded, said with a smug smile,
We're not here to argue. If you're tired of helping us, say so.
But don't disrespect our intelligence by asking us to beg. Emma, standing by the door, watching silently, felt something shift in his young heart. His father, his hero, was being belittled by the very people he once carried on his back. Mr. Abel responded with only one sentence, heavy and final.
I am not educated, yes.
But even God respects sacrifice. That night, the air in their mansion was thick. Betrayal from blood is not pain. It's poison. Olivia had always seen herself as refined, educated and above the village ways. She believed her education elevated her, and her engagement to Dr. Namdi, a quiet but respected medical consultant, seemed to seal her status. The family was buzzing with preparations. The wedding was to be held in Enugu, lavish, classy, and paid for entirely by Mr. Abel. But behind the scenes, cracks were forming. Dr. Namdi, though reserved, was not weak. Then came the dinner, a formal gathering at Namdi's home, with his parents, uncles, and aunties present. It was meant to be a casual pre-wedding celebration, but wine loosened tongues, and Olivia, confident in her charm, made a demand. Namdi must transfer the ownership of his house into my name. After all, when a woman brings class into a home, she should be secured.
Isn't that right, Mummy?
She said, turning to his mother. The room went cold. Namdi shifted uncomfortably from where Olivia sits. His mother choked on her drink. His uncle set down his glass slowly. Then Namdi calmly said, We're building a home, Olivia, not a battleground. Olivia, eyes blazing, snapped,
A battleground only exists when one partner refuses to submit.
Wow, Namdi gasps. Her future mother-in-law, stone-faced, stood up. I raised a man, not a puppet. A week before the wedding, Namdi called it off. I love you, Olivia, but I will not marry Pride. When the news hit Abel's household, he said nothing, just stared long and hard at his sister as she wept on their couch. Caroline shook her head.
You tried to tame a lion with a whip.
Now you cry because it roared. It was 2 days after the canceled wedding when Olivia stormed into Mr. Abel's compound unannounced. She walked past the security gate like a wounded queen, her heels clicking across the tiled floor. Her eyes were swollen, not from sadness, but from fury, a fury she could no longer contain. Caroline was in the living room, helping Emma with his homework, when Olivia barged in. You! Olivia shrieked, pointing a trembling finger. You're the serpent! The one that whispered lies into Namdi's ears. Caroline looked up, calm, unbothered. Olivia, lower your voice. This is not your father's compound. This is my brother's house, Olivia snapped. And everything here belongs to all of us. You think because you wear lace and gel, you can control Abel like he's your houseboy? Caroline stood slowly, eyes fixed on Olivia. What happened between you and your fiancé is not my fault. You brought arrogance to his home and called it class. He simply saw the truth. Olivia lunged forward. You're the reason he saw it. You poisoned him. You ruined me. Their shouting echoed through the marble halls. Emma hid behind the curtains, tears welling in his eyes. Mr. Abel rushed in, and for the first time in his life, he shouted louder than he ever had. Enough! His voice thundered. Silence fell. He looked at Olivia.
You are not my daughter.
You are my sister, but you have made yourself an enemy in this house. You insult my wife, the only woman who stood by me when you called me an illiterate. Get out. Caroline turned away, her hands trembling as she fought tears. Olivia stood there, stunned. Her own brother had chosen his wife over her, over blood, and for the first time, she felt the burn of consequences. As the months passed, and Mr. Abel's resolve held firm, Chima, Kelechi, and Olivia sank deeper into desperation. Their once comfortable lives, built on another man's sacrifice, began to crumble.
No more fuel allowances.
No more rent-free apartments. No more weekend transfers for urgent needs. They were no longer ashamed. They were enraged. One night, at a dimly lit bar in Mushin, the 3 siblings sat in silence over half-empty bottles of stout. Kelechi was the first to speak the unspeakable.
Abel's wealth is cursed.
Not by evil. By his own hands. He's denying us what should be ours, Chima hissed. Do you know how many people get rich and share the spoils with family? This one behaves like he's God. Olivia, still licking the wounds from her public disgrace, murmured.
We should take back what belongs to us.
The bartender, overhearing them, leaned close and whispered, You want results, go see Mama Ezenwa. She doesn't fail. And so they did. In the outskirts of Badagry, deep in a forested village, they found Mama Ezenwa, a feared priestess known for balancing destinies. She welcomed them with chants and cowries, asking no questions, only for names, birth relics, and hair strands from Mr. Abel. What you want, she warned, comes at a cost. Blood for blood, power for price. Desperate and darkened by envy, they agreed. From that day forward, strange things began happening to Mr. Abel. His businesses faced inexplicable delays. Contracts were lost mysteriously. He started waking up drenched in sweat, haunted by dreams of shadowy figures whispering curses. Even Emma fell ill suddenly. Doctors found nothing wrong. Caroline prayed, fasted, wept. Then, one night, Mr. Abel had a dream. His late mother appeared, weeping at the foot of his bed. Your blood is plotting against your breath, she said. Go home, go to the shrine of your fathers. Mr. Abel ignored the warnings. The dream, the sleepless nights, the constant whisper of dread pressing against his spirit. He pushed it aside. It's stress, he told himself. Business is tough. The economy is tight. I just need rest. But the rest did not come. His body began to fail him slowly. First, it was migraines that lingered like shadows. Then his legs started to ache. Some mornings, he couldn't rise from bed. Doctors ran tests, but all results returned clean.
There is nothing physically wrong,
the doctor said. Perhaps it's psychological. Caroline knew better. She watched as her husband, the once mighty pillar of strength, began to stoop. His vibrant voice turned hoarse. His skin paled. Even Emma, young as he was, began to sleep beside his father's bed. Too afraid to leave him alone, the staff whispered. Some began to resign quietly.
Something is not right in this house,
they said. And still, Mr. Abel refused to believe it could be the handiwork of blood. But one evening, as the sun dipped behind the fence, Emma ran into the house, clutching something, a dead bird wrapped in red cloth and buried near their compound wall.
Mummy, I saw Uncle Kalechi's driver dig here last night,
he said. That was the moment Caroline broke. She drove straight to the village, to the family's ancestral compound, and summoned the chief priest.
It is your blood that stains your husband's peace,
the priest said after a single glance at Mr. Abel's photograph. And he still protects them. Caroline was a woman of faith, logic, and prayer.
When the village priest warned her of a spiritual
assault from Mr. Abel's own bloodline, she dismissed it quietly. Our God is not an idol worshiper, she told herself. She returned to Lagos, still clinging to hope that doctors would discover what medicine had missed. But what met her at the gate of their mansion was beyond what prayer alone could mend. Mr. Abel, her beloved husband, was barely breathing. His body had withered like a dried leaf. His hands trembled like paper in the wind. He could no longer recognize Emma, who stood silently by his bedside, holding a worn drawing he had made of them, father and son, laughing beneath a mango tree. That night, as the Harmattan breeze howled through the windows, Mr. Abel whispered his last words. Tell them, sacrifice is sacred. Then he was gone. Caroline screamed. Emma clung to her, his sobs muffled against her wrapper. The mansion, once filled with warmth, went cold. Staff gathered outside. Neighbors flocked in disbelief. The news spread like fire. Mr. Abel is dead. At the funeral, Chima wept the loudest. Kalechi wore dark shades. Olivia fainted twice. But those who knew the truth could feel the bitterness beneath the tears. Caroline stood by the coffin, silent. She wore no makeup. Her gala was plain. Her eyes held no tears, only depth. She had lost the man who built not just a family, but a legacy. A man, destroyed not by enemies, but by the very ones he lifted from the dust. The day of Mr. Abel's burial was drenched in tears and silence. The air was heavy with grief, and as his casket was lowered into the earth, it felt as if the sky itself mourned. Dignitaries came, business partners wept, and the clergy sang of eternity. But underneath the hymns, another storm was brewing. As the final handfuls of red sand hit the coffin, Chima stood up before the mourners, voice loud and trembling.
We won't let this go silently,
he shouted. Our brother was murdered. Gasps broke out. By this woman, he screamed, pointing straight at Caroline. This Jezebel.
She finished him with her village medicine and prayer candles.
Kalechi joined in, grabbing a microphone from the MC. He started dying the moment she took full control of his business.
She poisoned his mind, then poisoned his body.
The crowd erupted in confusion. Some relatives rushed forward to restrain them. Others stood in shock. Olivia, dressed in funeral black, burst into exaggerated sobs. Caroline stood, arms folded, face emotionless. Her silence was like thunder. Then she stepped forward and said calmly, You called him illiterate. You mocked his sacrifices. You drained his soul. And now you want to bathe in his blood? You three will reap everything you've sown. With that, she turned and walked away, straight through the crowd, hand firmly gripping Emma's. But the fire had only just begun. The days that followed were like a second burial. Caroline hadn't even finished mourning when court papers arrived. Chima, Kalechi, and Olivia were dragging her to court over Abel's estate. They accused her of forging the will, manipulating their brother, practicing fetish spirituality to eliminate him. The case went viral. Blogs fed on it like vultures.
Millionaire's widow battles in-laws in court.
TV anchors debated it. Pastors preached sermons with subtle references. Even neighbors started whispering. Emma, now withdrawn, refused to return to school. He'd begun drawing pictures of his father with wings, watching over them. Caroline, despite the storm, stood her ground. She gathered Mr. Abel's authentic legal documents, business records, and a small army of witnesses. His lawyer, staff, loyal relatives, and even clients who could testify to his clear will and intentions. At the first court hearing, Chima wore agbada and dark shades. Kelechi arrived with lawyers in tailored suits. Olivia wore all white and carried a Bible. Caroline entered with Emma by her side, holding a simple black handbag and the truth. In court, the siblings were loud, dramatic. They spoke of being betrayed, of being cheated by their own blood. But when Caroline's lawyer unveiled a video recording of Mr. Abel, recorded just 2 weeks before his death, clearly stating, "Everything I built is for my wife and son. My siblings have taken all they could from me. Let them learn to build their own." The courtroom fell silent, and that silence echoed. After the courtroom defeat, Chima, Kelechi, and Olivia were humiliated, but not changed. Their rage evolved into something darker. They believed Caroline had stolen everything, not just wealth, but power, status, and bloodline honor. "She must go," Kelechi whispered one evening.
She stood between us and our destiny. Now she must feel what Abel felt.
And so they returned to Mama Ezenwa, deep in the night, cloaked in black wrappers, barefoot and silent. The old priestess waited, a candle flickering in front of her red-stained altar. "You again," she murmured. "You asked for justice before. Now you want vengeance." Olivia stepped forward. "We want her soul. We want her gone." Mama Ezenwa laughed, a sound that made the fire tremble. "This time," she said, "the price is your names, your future."
"You will get what you ask, but nothing more will ever grow in your hands."
They agreed without flinching. That night, the ritual began. Feathers, blood, bones, and chants. The next morning, Caroline awoke to find her car windows shattered, strange symbols etched in ashes at her gate, and dead lizards strung to her door. She knew this was no longer rumor. It was war. But this time, she didn't retreat. She packed her bags and Emma's. They traveled to Nasuka, to the home of her late husband's uncle, Chief Ezekwesili, the family's last surviving elder and spiritual custodian. He welcomed her with silence. Then he said,
"Your enemies are no longer hiding."
"That is their mistake. Nsuka was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place where Caroline and Emma could hide from the storm and find strength from family. But it turned out to be the lion's den." Chief Ezekwesili, Mr. Abel's revered uncle, had smiled when they arrived. He welcomed them with kola nuts and proverbs, but his smile hid secrets darker than the forest path they had taken. He was one of them. Caroline began to notice strange things. Her food always tasted off. Emma developed sudden rashes. In the middle of the night, she'd hear chanting, low, deep, coming from the back compound where Chief Ezekwesili's shrine stood. Then, one evening, while preparing for bed, Caroline suddenly collapsed. Her entire body shivered violently, and her eyes rolled back. Emma screamed, banging on the door. Servants rushed in, but none called a doctor. Instead, the old chief summoned his personal herbalist, who gave Caroline a dark, thick concoction and murmured words in a language even she couldn't recognize. She woke up 3 days later, frail, disoriented, and alone. Emma sat by her bed, his eyes hollow with fear.
"Mummy, the man with the beads," he said. "You're not going to leave this village alive,"
he whispered. It was then she realized that coming here was a mistake, a deadly one. She had run to her enemies, thinking they were kin. The weight of Abel's legacy was now hers to carry. But with every passing second, It was slipping through her weakening fingers. Caroline's sickness lingered like a ghost. Days passed, then weeks. Her body grew weaker. Her skin clung to her bones. Her voice became a whisper of what it once was. Yet, she didn't die. She remained in a fragile limbo, too weak to stand, too stubborn to surrender. Emma, now only a shadow of the bright boy he once was, never left her side. He fed her watery pap, wiped her sweat, and knelt in quiet corners of the compound, whispering prayers. But Chief Ezekwesili grew anxious. Olivia Chima, and Kelechi sent the word constantly. Why hasn't she died yet? The old man's answer was always the same.
She is being kept.
One stormy night, the chief went to his hidden shrine, alone. There, he lit a final ritual fire, one meant to break whatever was shielding her. But as the flames rose, the shrine's clay wall cracked, and a bird flew in from the night, perching silently above the flames. The chief fell to his knees. Who protects her? He whispered. Back in her room, Caroline opened her eyes for the first time in 3 days. Her lips moved, and she whispered one name, Abel. She survived because the weight of love she carried had become a shield. Not even death could break it. While Caroline battled for her life, Chima, Kelechi, and Olivia began what they called reclaiming their birthright. They stormed into Abel's properties, his warehouses, shops, even the duplex in Ikeja, claiming ownership. They brought thugs, broke locks, harassed staff, and seized vehicles. They swaggered into the offices like kings returning from exile, but they didn't realize Abel had prepared for them in death. The will, properly notarized, sealed, and filed, was airtight. All assets were placed under a trust fund, solely managed by Caroline and Emma. The board of trustees, led by Abel's lawyer and 2 of his oldest business partners, were firm. No document, no access, no negotiation. Staff loyal to Abel reported every intrusion. The police were called. Chima was arrested once for forcing his way into the Apapa warehouse. Kelechi tried to bribe a bank manager to unfreeze an account, but failed. Olivia showed up at the estate in Lekki and tried to evict Caroline's cousin who managed it. She was removed by security. Their shame burned hotter than their anger. They became outcasts, mocked by former friends, avoided by old allies. The very community that once envied them now watched their fall like a tragic play, and the more they were denied, the more unstable they became. And Caroline, lying in bed, began to smile. They thought he left me with weakness. She whispered to Emma. But your father gave me a fortress. The news came like thunder on a quiet morning. Caroline is dead. A cousin of Caroline's, who still lived in Nsuka, spread the word. She claimed Caroline passed in the night, quietly, with Emma by her side. There was no burial ceremony, no obituary, and no mourning cloths distributed, just silence, and a small wooden box said to carry her ashes. Chima, Kelechi, and Olivia gathered in their usual corner in Mushin, faces blank, spirits stirred. Chima muttered,
She can't just die like that. Not without a fight.
Kelechi asked, You think they staged it? Hit her? Why? Olivia, eyes darting, whispered, To protect that boy! Emma, he's the heir! She knew we'd never stop. They sat there in disbelief.
If Caroline was truly dead,
Emma, an 8-year-old now, stood as the legal heir to an empire, vulnerable, exposed, easy to manipulate. But if Caroline was alive and hiding, what if it's all a lie? Olivia said, her voice shaking. What if this is a trap? Yet something deeper unsettled them. None of their diabolical plots had reached closure. No triumph, no peace. Just silence. And in that silence, fear began to grow. Because those who fake their death rarely return empty-handed. Chima, Kelechi, and Olivia stayed in the compound after hearing of Caroline's death. They laughed quietly that evening, huddled over bottles of stout and leftover rice.
"If it's true," Kelechi said, "then God has finally answered our prayers."
But why wasn't there a funeral? Olivia asked, her gold earrings dancing in the lantern light. Ashes, please! Do we look like fools? Chima grinned.
"Fake or not, the way is clear."
That boy is all that stands between us and the estate. And how hard can it be to confuse a child? They toasted. Sleep became a stranger to the Abel siblings. The more they tried to erase the memory of Caroline, the louder her presence became. Mirrors cracked, walls bled. Dreams turned into violent encounters with fire, blood, and the echo of her voice whispering. I left, but not without planting my shield. Driven by desperation and madness, they turned to the darkest ritual yet, a banishment of blood. This time, their target was the last standing heir, Emma.
"If we cannot touch the throne,"
Olivia said, eyes glassy with vengeance, "we must break the crown." They returned once more to the infamous Mama Ezenwa, offering gold, goats,
and something far darker, a
strand of Emma's hair, stolen years ago and preserved. Mama Ezenwa stared at it, then said,
"This boy is not protected by Earth.
His shield is soul deep.
You cannot kill him, but
you may leave a mark." That night, as Emma slept peacefully in a guarded home in Enugu, under the care of his mother's cousin, a black smoke slithered through the cracks in the windows. It hovered over him, then struck. He woke up screaming. By the time help arrived, his eyes were blood red. The doctors could not explain it. Tests were inconclusive. The verdict was final. Emma was blind. The news rocked the city. The boy who was meant to inherit greatness had been struck down by forces unseen. The Abel name was once again on everyone's lips. But this time, drenched in pity, horror, and anger. And Chima, Kelechi, and Olivia laughed. They celebrated, but their laughter was short-lived, because something ancient and merciless was now hunting them. Emma, now blind and barely 10 years old, sat each morning on the veranda of his mother's cousin's flat, listening to the world he could no longer see. He had lost his father. He had lost his mother. Now, even his inheritance had been stolen. Chima, Kelechi, and Olivia, emboldened by their brutal success, broke into Mr. Abel's businesses, forging documents, coercing managers, and paying off corrupt court clerks. They claimed Caroline had no authority. They manipulated tribal customs, declaring themselves true heirs.
They seized nearly everything.
The warehouses in Apapa, the spare parts business in Onitsha, the duplex in Lekki, the vehicles, bank accounts, and company shares, all gone. Only two things remained beyond their reach. Foreign properties in London and Canada, untouched due to strict legal protections. An offshore trust fund, left in the names of Caroline and Emma, locked by legal firewalls Mr. Abel had cleverly crafted in his final years. But none of that comforted Emma. Not now. Not when he lived with the smell of pain, betrayal, and spiritual scars. He had once wanted to become an engineer like Kelechi falsely claimed to be. Now he only dreamed of vengeance. He cried at night, fists clenched. He refused to eat, refused to speak, until one day an envelope arrived. Inside was a letter with a foreign stamp, a name signed at the bottom. Professor Kenneth Uzo, Director, International Child Relief Institute, Toronto, Canada. The letter said,
"Your mother, Caroline Abel,
had applied to have you enrolled in our Overseas Legacy Protection Program. If you are reading this, it means you are now eligible for immediate relocation and guardianship under our care. Pack only what you need."
"Your flight is in 2 weeks."
It began slowly. Chima's factory caught fire mysteriously. Insurance denied the claim. 2 months later, the thugs he had hired to harass Abel's former staff turned against him, robbing his home and leaving him battered. Kelechi lost a contract worth millions, exposed for using forged credentials, his name blacklisted across corporate circles, his vehicles repossessed, his mistress left him. His wife filed for divorce. Olivia, once known for her elegance and charm, now wandered the streets of Ikija Market, talking to herself. She said she saw Caroline's face in every mirror. Every single mirror. The more they tried to keep the wealth, the more it burned their hands. The mansions became tombs, silent and cold. The bank accounts froze under federal investigation. Business partners severed ties. Former friends vanished. One by one, their world collapsed. Because luxury without labor is like a palace built on quicksand. And as for Emma, he boarded his flight to Canada in silence, tears rolling down his blind eyes. But his heart, full of fire. Years passed. The estate, once owned by Mr. Abel, now broken and battered from neglect and greed, went up for sale. Quietly, discreetly. The siblings were desperate. With no cash flow left, no assets of value, and disgrace haunting their every step, they decided to sell the very crown jewel of Abel's empire, and the buyer is AC Holdings Limited. They didn't ask questions. They just signed the papers. 3 weeks later, the gates of the estate opened again. This time, freshly painted, security tight, cameras installed, flowers blooming again. A new black Range Rover drove in. And stepping out, Caroline Abel, alive, glowinga, and stronger. Behind her, holding her hand, was Emma. Taller, confident, eyes wide open. His sight had returned. He smiled at the gatekeeper and whispered, "Home." Word spread like wildfire. Lagos paused. Blogs exploded. Some said it was a resurrection. Others said it was revenge. But the truth was simple. She never died. She had only played the one card they never expected: silence. And now she had taken back everything. The Abel siblings watched from afar, broken, haunted, and forgotten. They had misused what they didn't earn. She reclaimed what was rightfully hers. The empire stood again, this time protected by wisdom and blood. Just as the estate gates closed behind Caroline and Emma, a convoy of police vans rolled into Mushin, blaring sirens through the cracked streets where Kelechi, Chima, and Olivia now lived in shame. The truth had finally surfaced. Investigators had uncovered the darkest part of their conspiracy: the use of a young orphaned boy in a diabolical ritual aimed at stealing Mr. Abel's spiritual protection and transferring his wealth spiritually. The case, once cold, was reignited by Caroline's silent efforts and evidence. She had been gathering all along. Witnesses testified. Documents surfaced. Even Mama Ezenwa was arrested and flipped under interrogation. The siblings stood trial not just for fraud and forgery, but for ritual abuse and conspiracy to commit spiritual murder. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the verdict.
You lived off a man you never respected.
You murdered a soul you never mourned?
And you tried to destroy a child you never raised.
You are sentenced to life imprisonment. No parole, no appeal. The gavel fell. As they were led away in chains, Kelechi screamed, "It was supposed to be ours!" But the truth had always been clear. If you don't know how to make wealth, you won't know how to keep it. And the Abel legacy? Restored, protected, eternal. Lessons learned. Sacrifice is sacred. Mr. Abel gave up his own education to uplift his siblings. But sacrifice without gratitude breeds entitlement and betrayal. His story teaches us the value of selflessness and the pain that can follow when it's taken for granted. Entitlement destroys character. Chima, Kelechi, and Olivia were handed opportunities but refused to work for themselves. When you don't earn what you enjoy, you lack the wisdom to sustain it. Greed always backfires. Their obsession with control and inheritance led to their moral decay and eventual downfall. Greed, unchecked, turns blessings into burdens. You reap what you sow. The Abel siblings sowed laziness, disrespect, and dark intentions, and reaped shame, loss, and imprisonment. Life has a way of giving back what you give out. True wealth is wisdom. Mr. Abel, though uneducated, built an empire with wisdom. His foresight in protecting his estate ensured that his son and wife remained safe even after his death. The power of silence and strategy. Caroline's decision to fake her death was brilliant and symbolic. Sometimes, retreat is not surrender, but preparation for victory. Children carry legacy. Emma's pain didn't end his purpose. Even blind, he stood resilient. His story teaches that the next generation can rise from ashes stronger than before. Justice may delay, but it never forgets. Despite their temporary success, Abel's siblings faced justice. Wrongdoing may flourish for a time, but truth always prevails.